Alright, further response to Fred's video. So, still on the subject of what's the framework that you describe what you're attempting to do in having conversations about maybe reality. Yeah. And he says that objective and subjective is limiting terminology. And I think it has all the elements you need. Right? The fact is, there's only the limitations are ignorance, which you're making claims of, stating that other people are ignorant, that I don't think you can substantiate. I mean, the fact that I haven't read the new edition of the book about the three pigs Aunt Thelma. Because I don't read fantasy novels, Professor Anton, Infinitude and Beyond nonsense, doesn't leave me uninformed. It leaves me undiluted. It leaves me unperverted by fantasy nonsense. I don't get lost in a bunch of superhero bullshit, a bunch of let's aggrandize crapola, and I keep grounded in an understanding that I'm just a bacterium with a bunch of little features, and that's all it is, and that my consciousness is in fact just an aberration, an echo, a noise the brain makes. Yeah, to Anticontavad. Maybe I'll respond to his video in this video. The one he did on desire, causing all kinds of confusion. How can you have free will? How can you have determinism? Yeah, well, desire is a subconscious mechanism in its structure and its form. It's percolated into consciousness as a sensation. And it's reacted to by the subconscious as code. It doesn't react to it as a desire. It reacts to it as a known syndrome of, what it is. The fact is that the fact that we actually feel is just noise the engine brain makes. The brain could do it without the noise, theoretically. I mean, I can't describe the exact mechanism by which it establishes the existence of value, but I'm just saying I think it's pretty clear that our consciousness is an illusion. It isn't a real thing. It's a thing that's happening inside our brains, and that the happening is all that matters in terms of the reactions created. That's why the brain does it, is because it creates a reaction. It creates action in the world. And that's all it's after. And the fact that it creates real positive and negatives, it doesn't really care. It just wanted to create the idea of positive and negative so it could create a learning machine. I don't want to get into that, get lost in that argument. But anyway, alright, so limiting terminology, I would say limiting terminology is when people start talking about intersubjective agreements. And they start to lose focus on words like rational and logical and reasonable. The fact is we have a lot of facts, alright, and everybody wants to ignore the facts. And so that's where I'm going to call you. That's where I'm going to point my finger. You're going to tell me I'm uninformed. I'm going to tell you that you're a fact bigot, okay, that you're a fact denier and a fact ignorer. That if you can avoid the facts, you avoid the facts, and you play only in the facts you want to play in. You're definitely somebody who has peeked over the maze and seen that it don't go anywhere, and you go right back into your little subjectivism and say, well, I can play this little limited game because it's still green and pastoral and comforting and warm and all that crap, and I don't have to deal with that ugly truth of what really is taking place, replication for the sake of replication and whatnot. So you may call me ignorant because I haven't read your fable and fantasy books, but I'm going to call you a distorter and a perverter of the truth that we do know, facts that are already on the table and well fucking established. So you're denying reason and logic, in my opinion. You're insulting them. And you're doing it by pretending to insult the idea of objective and subjective. As stated in my video, we already know the liabilities of subjective perspective, and they're all liabilities. The liabilities of perversion, of bias, from the subjective point of view and the limitations of the subjective point of view. So I mean, it's already convicted as not a very good source of understanding. Duh. All right, again, I would argue that truth is not complicated as a response to your, you need to read 7 million fantasy fable books about infinitude before you know what reality is, or before you're competent to be a philosopher. I argue nonsense. The only thing that makes somebody incompetent to be a philosopher is listening to the human race, turning on the TV. You know, the truth is dirt simple. And human beings just want to make it complicated. God makes it complicated. Spiritualism makes it complicated. All this mumbo jumbo about your art and your beauty and all your beauty is truth crap. The bullshit. I think, therefore I am. Bullshit. That's all bullshit. You know. So yeah, don't open a book that has anything to do with anything other than explaining to you biological function, physical function. The truth has been revealed through those sciences, and you don't need these silly human interpretations, which are just perversions from subjective perspectives. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. Oh dear, I have to read my notes, which is always dangerous. Tunes and tone, if undo I find nonsensical. I think I was saying something in there about you've made tons and tons and tons of videos, and yeah, I've pointed out how, what are you saying, Fred? What the fuck is that crap? What does that mean, Fred? Yeah, so yeah, none of that stuff means anything. It's gobbledygook, okay? Mumbo jumbo. So yeah, you want to say that that's a counter argument? Fine. I found it incomprehensible. You might as well be talking it in Japanese, because infinitude. Yeah, no, sorry. These are this nonsense. You know, even the words, the terminology you use all the time. What the hell is it? Embodied. Yeah, right. What are you talking about? Mind versus brain. Alright, so then at this point in the video, I'll play the end of the video. He's talking about some other guy he was arguing with, and the fact that, so the guy uses words like fundamental, central, and necessary, or something like that. And Fred is pointing out how, oh, well, these metaphors create the. Yeah, that's our language. Our language is language for dummies. Okay, that's the language we're stuck with. It's language, it's vocabulary for dummies. Alright, so for real world conversations, they had to have fake words, like random and spontaneous and all kinds of fake words that don't mean anything. And many of the concepts were metaphors, because they needed everything turned into a cartoon. Alright, so it's a very untechnical, very inexplicit language that's full of lies. Like spiritualism. Yeah, so that's but that's not our fault. I mean, me as a communicator, I mean, let's concede that liability. I often say the word I blah blah blah, and you know, when I'm saying that, I'm really saying my brain. You know, so again, we have all these little flaws in language. I even use the word spontaneous and the word random now and then. I mean, it does. Flags do fly up now, so it doesn't happen as often, because I say, wait a minute, that's not a word really, it's just something made up, like probability, like a lot of things. People just made this crap up because they don't want to admit what it really means, which is we have errors in our understanding, but we know where the solid understanding is. So anyway, let's play the rest of this.
In this kind of way that I'm suggesting here, it doesn't feel like that at all. It just feels like you're expressing the obvious in slightly different ways. But that feeling of...
Alright, so just this idea that now we're going to talk about feelings. And so why should we do that? Why should we have to do that? Why should I have to say that, you know, that I have to express confidence in the sense of a feeling? I feel confident. No, I understand myself to be reliable and dependable. I have well examined this statement and I can find no flaw in it. But again, we have to resort to some sort of, it feels obvious. Well, no, I understand it to be obvious. So again, the language is at fault here. It isn't a fault of what the person is attempting to express. And so this is sort of just a straw man. I mean, to pretend that the person making the statement is saying it in the metaphor and not just using the metaphor, I mean, you're just not conceding. You're just saying, I'm going to apply the metaphor to what he's saying, and you're being technically explicit about the metaphor and not recognizing that the only reason why the metaphor exists is because the technical explicit language isn't humanly useful. It isn't common language. And so it's unnatural language. So you're expecting somebody to speak to you unnaturally to avoid you technically imposing metaphor on their frickin' words, on their intent. Somebody necessarily, if I say I feel something, it doesn't necessarily mean that I feel something. It just means that I'm expressing it in the vernacular that's common.
Obviousness is coming from those modes of expression and thought. And so they're very deceptive. I mean, they're useful. You know, there are times when it's really useful to be able to draw on a foundationist understanding. And there are times when it's really useful to be able to draw on a center-periphery model or a...
Well, I think it's not just useful, it is fundamental. Again, fundamentalism is fundamental to function. I mean, just about everything that you can come up with has an instrumentality that it's built upon. And just as we were built incrementally, most things are built incrementally in stages. You just don't throw every piece at it at the same time and it pops into place. So I mean, it's a fundamental part of fundamental function. It's a fundamental part of matter. There's the energy itself. The energy coalesces into little packets. They're called subatomic particles. The subatomic particles coalesce into things we call matter or atoms. So it is fundamental, and it's fundamental to understand that origin, because understanding that origin will give you insight into what the matter is. That the matter isn't energy. I mean, isn't matter. That all it is a collection of energy.
Or an essence model, or all the other ones that I've talked about, crossword puzzle metaphors, or yeah, there's just dozens of them. Know your art's boat, you know, it's this idea of a ship that you're endlessly rebuilding. There's lots of different models to do it, but the model isn't the reality. The menu is.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, I don't even understand your models, okay? Because your examples, yeah, it escapes me how that metaphor applies to anything real or anything substantively meaningful, like any discussion that really matters. Because any discussion that really matters is going to have to do with our origins and how we developed, and that certainly was incremental and based on foundations. Foundations of function and purpose, survival, for example, at any cost.
It's not the meal, the map is not the territory, as Kodzybski said. These are the ways in which we understand. These aren't the things that we are understanding. And that distinction is really important. You have to sometimes turn the focus on the means by which you are coming to understand.
Yeah, well, that's only valid if you have some counter argument to present. So if you're going to make some counterpoint, this is why it's necessary, but you're going to have to show me why it's necessary. You're going to show me how this works. To say that, yeah, I have this secret weapon, but it's never applicable, well, what's the point? So unless you have a counter statement, so what's the new contextualization of replicating molecule on planet Earth? What added statement are you going to make with all your metaphorical bibble babble to change the basic dynamic? What are you going to add to that fact in and of itself as a fact?
Something, and applying terms like objective subjective is one of those means by which we come to an understanding. It's not the understanding itself.
Well, again, says you. I mean, I can't. What do you want me to do? How? So no umpire is an umpire. No umpire can understand the principles of being an umpire. I mean, it is the mechanics. It is a thing accomplished. You either do it successfully or you don't do it. Okay? To be objective, what you need is to not have a bias and to somehow have informed understanding, a good enough perspective, a viewpoint that justifies conclusion drawing. So if I rise above a maze that has rats in it, for that context, for the purpose of that evaluation, I probably have access to all I need to know. Okay, rats go in, they have a function, and rats go out. And I can observe what needs to be observed and draw conclusions about rats in mazes. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's not a wide enough context to say why is the rat maze on the table in the laboratory in the first place, but that would just be widening the objectivity.
Yeah, so that's weird, really. And just to return to Gary's video, there, Gary, you're talking about. Sorry, but some of this stuff is. I'm sure I'm not denying your seriousness and sincerity, but some of the stuff is just nuts, I'm afraid. I mean, at one point you used the term objective perspective. I mean, just think about what that.
Yeah, I did it right in the beginning of the fucking video with a goddamn chart, you fucking goddamn cunt. Yeah, objective perspective, that's right. Above the maze versus in the maze. I said it in the video. How the fuck can you say that's nuts? I gotta hear this.
Objective perspective. You know, if you've got any kind of a sense of what you're saying, that should have the same significance as the smell of burning rubber does to an electrician. Objective perspective. That's an oxymoron. It makes no sense.
Oh, right. So it's not an objective perspective. If I'm a rat and I climb out of if I'm a human being and I'm captured by aliens and they put me inside of a gigantic maze with gigantic walls, and all there is maze behavior, there's Tyrannosaurus, there's all kinds of things, and I'm obligated to play in the maze, and I climb out of the maze, and I see the maze, and I see what's going on. Are you saying that's not now an advanced, an objective perspective, a perspective outside of the maze game? God damn, I can't believe this bullshit. I mean, this is just so silly. But this is the key of it, right? I mean, he watched my video and somehow he didn't get that there was two major components I repeated like 3 or 4 times. Right? That there's 2 elements that corrupt our perception. Bias, prejudice, okay, I desire, I want, okay, blinds me maybe what to other people need or what other people care about. And the second one, bribery, essentially. I'm getting bribed or seduced out of my fair and rational judgment, or ignorance. And those are the 2 components of subjectivity. In the maze is subjectivity. In the maze is blind. Above the maze is an advanced and now objective perspective. You can see the game. Fuck. You're now capable of umpiring.
Hence, you can't have an objective perspective. That's perspectives use visual metaphors of viewpoints and worldviews. And objective denies that, so it's just nuts, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Oh, whatever. It's nuts. Okay, well, yours is whatever, gay and weak and feeble and faggoty, and foolish and mushy and rubbish. Yeah, there's the word for it. You can call my philosophy nuts, and I'll call your philosophy rubbish.
And you also do this thing where you consign other ways of knowing to, or other structures of knowing. You've probably already done it with this video so far, as being kind of poetics, I think you call it, poetry, which is fine. I have no problem with that word. But you do that just after you've drawn a picture of a race course and said that accurately depicts reality. You know, you've constructed a metaphor of knowledge like a race course with the horses and the jockey.
Okay, so look, I used the race course on purpose because it's a common phrase used called a horse in the race, right? I don't have a horse in the race, okay? And so that's what I used it for, because I was explaining the biased element of subjectivity, and that often if we have a horse in the race, like my child is now going on the roller coaster, and all of a sudden I'm going to be concerned about the safety of the roller coaster, where a week ago when other kids were going on the roller coaster, I didn't give a fuck.
And the owners and the people in the stand and the horses themselves, all having different kinds of perspectives on this experience. And then you create some kind of divine figure overseeing the whole damn thing.
Yeah, divine. So where did I imply that you need any divinity or that it's some sort of magical thing? Not at all. You can just, through rational, using our brain, our modeling brain, okay, you can take the parts of a car. Let's say you see the wheels, I can take a car apart and throw the parts on the ground, and you could assemble it. You can say, okay, I understand round, I understand rubber. You can draw conclusions about the functionality of the different, what it's likely the different pieces might be functioning as, based on their form. And you can do the same thing in understanding the mechanisms of other things. You can Freud it, okay? You can analyze the motivations and impetuses and the origins of its function. You can see the bugle player, and you can say, okay, it's there for aesthetics, to give everybody a nice, good little raw feeling going into the big race, to build up the tension. You can dissect the elements. Every element can be dissected and understood from an objective perspective.
You claim as represents objectivity, kind of reinventing God, by the way.
Yeah, fuck you. And then yeah, it's a reinvention of God, right? That's what every scientist in the history of mankind has reinvented God, because he did some analysis, because he did some dissection. Ooh, I'm now being God because I took something apart to see how it works. Fail.
Suggested any other way of looking at the world is poetic. No, that's poetics. That you created an analogy, and then you're arguing for the analogy. Do you understand what I mean?
No, I don't know what you mean at all. I'm not arguing for the analogy. I'm using the analogy that you can, and I'm quite obviously saying you could apply this to every single thing around you. Every bit of life has an element of this, whether you have a horse in the race kind of shit.
It's model-dependent reality, and you draw the model. And quite frankly, it's a very...
Yeah, model-dependent reality, right? That's really bad. That's God playing, and he's going to say it's rubbish. He's going to say modeling reality is rubbish. That's right, and he's saying it clearly just because he knows the truth. The actual model will reveal the snake eating its own ass bullshit. And he wants to play a different game. He doesn't want to play the game that's revealed through analyzing facts and building a model out of the facts. We have tons of facts. We can build one hell of a model. He doesn't like what the model says, and so therefore he's going to go backward and say, let's pretend we didn't see that.
Limited model. And there are far better models out there.
Like
we spend more time getting.
Yeah, like what? Infinitude. Bullshit. Lies. Go ahead. Propagandize some more.
Information. You would have a more informed set of ideas to bring to the table.
Yeah, what? What table? The table of liars and fakers and frauds. Oh my. Fabulists, liars, contrivers, spiritual nonsense. Why don't you go find a table and you can talk about your totem poles and your boogeyman and Sasquatch and whatever, chemtrails and whatever other kind of lie and bullshit that satisfies you. But yeah, no, don't, yeah. Take my non-present. You can put a little thing on the table with my name on it, but yeah, I'm not showing up for that conversation.
As opposed to just sincerity and a bit of gift to the gab.
What a pile of crock of shit.
So yeah, so this objective subject, it's very limited in use is where I'm going with it. And yes.
Yeah, the more interesting point to it would be to take it a step further, right? I mean, because ultimately, right, you're after some sort of ultimate conclusions, the absolute truth. the rationally some sort of rational obligation. What's the rational obligation based on the facts that we've acquired? You know, objective, subjective, take that out of the question. Let's just say, what is the balance of the evidence indicate? Is there any reasonable other conclusions? These kind of questions are valid questions.
You can use it to produce the feeling of being right. And yes, you can use it to produce the feeling of being certain. And if you're talking to people who aren't...
Well, again, so you think this is a polite video when you imply that I'm saying it and I'm getting off on some sort of perception of being right. And that's all that I'm after, some personal perception of being right. I mean, it's just so obnoxiously rude. You think you get away with that shit. Fuck you.
You know, thinking properly, or easily convinced, then you can convince people they're right. And that's what the Christians do.
Again, another accusation. So the philosophy couldn't be more distant from any of the fable religions of the past, or even the present. It couldn't be more distant by every single rational measure, and yet you will throw this slander. Amazing. And that's coming from somebody who vaguely talks about his magical other sources of knowledge and wisdom. The boat goes into the blah 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 fog of the blah 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 mumbo jumbo.
The fundamentalist Christians who end this to talk about objective reality. It's exactly the same language, it's the same models that are being mobilized.
Oh, the same models, right. Their model is a dogmatic God. Of course they have absolute truth because God has absolute truth. So yes, if you're going to accept the premise that a God exists, yes, God is absolutely knowledgeable. Duh. I mean, whatever, asshole. You want to sit there and say that's what I'm preaching or that's what I'm talking about? Then go ahead, but you're just a lying, slandering cunt for doing it, okay? I mean, I only found every fucking conversation by saying, let's go back to the basics, okay? We're a replicating molecule. Our brain exists because it's a tool. We have a psychology. I mean, where's the dogma or the religion in that? Oh, that's right. It doesn't exist. You're just a slanderer. Liar.
And
rubbish talking pig
they'll
shit.
Find audiences for people who are easily made to feel certain if the right models are...
Easily made to feel certain. Again, so again, it's just this impugn other people's philosophy. You're certain there's uncertainty. When will your uncertainty clear? Will there ever be a time in the whole evolution of the human being that you could ever imagine that human beings will ever give up on their uncertainty? How high do I have to make the towers of knowledge about our biological origins and the cold, hard physics of our reality? How high do those towers have to get before you'll concede they're high enough? We don't have to keep piling more bricks on them. The conclusions are there. They're drawn. There is no unicorn. How far do we have to go before you'll concede there's no unicorn? There's no multiverse. There's no magical other dimension for us to go make a phone call to. Oh, that's right, never. Because that's what you live for. That's your fucking religion. That's what you're clinging to. You goddamn hypocrite. Duplicitous hypocrite. How dare you call somebody else religious when you're the one holding out for the magical fantasy world?
Put in front of them, the right race course is described to them. That's the same thing, but you know, we should be past that, really.
I agree.
I think, in my squatting spot in the rocks.
Yeah, so anyway. Yeah, you wonder why we can't get along. Oh, yeah. Amazing. So anyway, so in the end, like I said, that's what this whole thing is really about. Is he's saying that we don't have nearly enough knowledge to draw any conclusions about what life is. We're still exploring the infinitude, still exploring the magic photons that can read our minds. We got to do a lot more waiting and studying and figuring. We can't figure out that there's something in this biology thing. The thunder and the lightning means, ooh, there's all kinds of mysterious stuff out there. That's his argument. And I'm arguing that, no, Darwin kind of sewed up our origins. Freud kind of sewed up our fucking psychology. And, you know, I mean, not everything he said was brilliant, but, you know, he did a lot of good work. You know, Marx, he said it even, the Four Horsemen, and Einstein. We're whatever, we're 90% there. I mean, you know, yeah, it'd be nice to do this two-split thing, just get this nonsense over with this magic photon stuff. Let's resolve that one. You know, and these magical beliefs in the special beyond speed of light communication crap and all this other little mishmash. Be nice to clear that shit up. But we know what we are. And this pretense that we're something other than little machines built to fight for an arbitrary, erroneously established imperative, survival of the fittest. Yeah, which means whoever bled the rest of them out the best. And that's all it's ever meant, and that's all it's ever will mean. It doesn't mean a damn fucking thing. It's pointless, silly, circular competition for absolutely no victory in the end. And you're just pretending and playing with yourselves and wanking and saying, you know, I'm a philosopher. No, I'm afraid you're the ones who've missed the philosopher boat because you're denying what is established fact. Son of a bitch. Woo, God's mad at me. Man, that was pretty funny. That was a big one. So it's obviously right. This is why, see, I was going to go for my walk, you know, when I went to work, and I said, no, I'm going to wait a half an hour, because I saw this shit on the radar, and I said, I ain't walking in that fucker. Rain's okay, but yeah, that shit, I ain't walking in that shit. That was a big one. Ooh, got me going a little though. Anyway, till next time.